Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and today we are beginning the season 2 finale with Army of Ghosts. Once again, just like last season, we'll be splitting the two-part finale into separate episodes because there's a lot going on, and it's probably the best way to do these in general. Here we have the return of the Cybermen, the return of the Daleks, and the proper introduction to Torchwood.
Mm.
It's quite a lot, and I think I noticed during this watch through, and it's something that I haven't noticed in my previous watches of this episode, that it is pretty much all set up.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, we get to about the
yeah.
halfway point, and I look at the time, and I'm like, I swear, like we're only 10 minutes in. Like, what's going on?
hmm
But like, it does a really good job of like putting all the pieces together for the next
Mm.
episode, which is
Mm.
something that I think the best multi-part stories do really well.
Yeah, it was interesting because when I was watching it, because I know you said, you wanted to do these episodes separately. Normally, when we do two-parters, we do them both at once.
Mhm.
So I was watching it, and I'm like, I'm not 100% sure why Cuff wanted me to do that because I feel like there's a whole section of the story that's missing here, and that, I mean, obviously that makes sense. This is the first part, but I thought, why not do them both together? But then I also happened to watch part two just last night. I'm like, oh, okay, I get why, because they are actually quite different.
Yeah.
Certainly in terms of tone, because yeah, I mean, obviously we'll get to it in more detail when we talk about Doomsday, but yeah, that the last like 20 minutes of that episode really gets pretty intense.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's also really this entire two-parter in general does a really good job stringing together various elements from across the season, with obviously the return of Mickey
mm,
in the parallel world. It's stuff that you don't even realize was set up in prior stories that does a great job of resolving itself all
yeah,
nicely here.
for sure. Um, and I think one of the things I found funny about it was, and I knew this because I remember parts of the episode fairly distinctly, but how lighthearted it is, especially
Mm.
in comparison to Doomsday, which gets
Yeah.
pretty full on. Um, you can really, and I've said this before, but RTD does a fairly good job of sort of emphasizing the campy nature of Doctor Who, but it does, it varies in how successful
Yeah.
that is. And here, I don't know if there's anything so campy that makes you think, oh, what the hell are you doing, RTD? I can't believe this. But like, man, there are some goofy moments in this episode. Um,
Goofy, but also it's so real as well. Like I think the moment that I
yeah.
think is like it perfectly encapsulates this is when they're flicking through the TV channels at the start with all the ghost stuff on it.
Mm.
And not only is there the soap opera and the daytime talk show, but then there's the Ectoshine
Uh,
spray solution, which is just so perfect and absolutely would happen if ghosts were to spring up in our world.
well, that's the thing, actually. And I think it's one of the things I've written down here, just in my notes. But the 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 idea of the ghost becoming like a worldwide phenomenon. Um, I'm not sure because they say they've only been around for it's 2 months, isn't it?
Few months, yeah.
I think even when I was younger and watched it, I thought I'm not sure if I totally believe that. I feel like it would take a bit longer for the world to get used to that. So I think that maybe that's part of why I find it kind of goofy because I'm like I would believe that would all happen, but I feel like it would take longer, maybe 6 months or something like that. So, um, yeah, I felt that wasn't as convincing perhaps
I mean,
as it
maybe,
wanted
but
to be.
sure, but I think back to when the first lockdown began. Do you remember how quickly people started selling custom masks and
Hmm.
that like we ended up not in all avenues obviously, but we ended up making a lot of adjustments to a big world changing thing pretty quickly then. I mean, and especially
Mm.
in this case when there's a massive commercial aspect to it,
Mm.
companies would 100% jump on the bandwagon as soon as possible.
Yeah, I suppose so. I think maybe it's because we're looking at this through the lens of 2023,
I
um,
suppose.
with where social media is much more of a presence than it was back in the humble year of 2006. Um, so maybe that was it. Like,
Maybe, yeah.
it's like because now I could believe it might have spread, that quickly with the advent of social media being really part of the fabric of our lives nowadays. But back then, how believable is that? Now, having said that, as I've often said, it again, he's like RTD. He's pushing the limits of how goofy he can get with that, but it just manages to work. So you sit there and you think, oh man, that's so dumb and funny with the Ecto Shine and the fucking
Well,
scene
this is
from
also
EastEnders.
this,
You just gotta love it.
this is also the world of Doctor Who, where strange shit like this happens every other month. Um, so if something like this if ghosts were to appear and then not instantly start attacking, vanish, then appear, then vanish again,
Hmm.
and especially if people were to trick themselves into imagining it's their
Dead
relatives come
relatives.
back. I can
Yeah.
understand that kind of society
Hmm.
getting on board with the ghosts really quickly. Now,
Yeah.
if they just all popped up today in our world all of a sudden, I can imagine a
Hmm.
bit more, not necessarily resistance, but a bit more, you know, uh, fear
Yeah.
regarding what this is.
Or even maybe even skepticism because people think, oh, they're just using CG or they're because
Holograms, yeah.
yeah, or something like that. Oh, like if there was like video evidence, like, oh, we got. Don't worry, guys, we totally got a picture of our dead uncle. He came back yesterday, and anyway, so
Now I'm
so yeah.
just imagining now, you actually believe the ghosts are real. Well, Ben Shapiro told me this. Like, I'm just imagining. Can you just imagine right wing conspiracy nutters in the world of Doctor Who and how they would spin all these kinds of things to fit their narratives, like whatever they may be.
Oh God. Yeah, that's a disturbing thought.
Let's do the
I
timescales. Let's not think
Yeah, I
about
was
this
gonna say
anymore.
I don't think I have the energy or the time to unpack that, but that's fine.
Okay, so out of 213 votes, and I should once again say that this and the second part episode are ranked separately. It doesn't look like they're ranked particularly far apart though.
Hmm.
Army of Ghosts in general, out of 213 votes, has an average rating of 7.6, which
Um,
surprised me.
really, I'm.
Yeah, well, even your mileage may vary, but in general, the finales of the RTD era are generally considered to be very, very strong
Mm,
episodes.
mm,
So the fact that this is only a 7.6 is a little confusing to me.
mm. What did Bad Wolf get? I'm sure it was higher than that, but
Bad Wolf got. Oh, hang on, I need to look up. I'm
yeah.
I'm I'm at a different doctor. Why isn't it just popping up? Well, that was Eccleston, you fool.
Huh.
Let's have a look. See, Bad Wolf got a 8.2,
Right. Yeah.
and the Parting of the Ways got 8.9.
Yeah. Yeah. So
This has
a fair bit of difference.
Yeah, this is a 7.6, and spoiler alert for 2 weeks from now, Doomsday got a 7.7.
See,
Which,
that surprised me because I thought that
hmm,
I. And again, we'll obviously talk about this more when we look at Doomsday, but I found Doomsday certainly more enjoyable than this story, but I think I don't know. I want to say that 7.6 is about right. I mean, I know we don't do things by half, so maybe I'd say like a 7, but we uh we'll see how I feel, I guess, at the end of this podcast.
yeah, it's
We
really
get to it.
confusing because there are so many, especially in the second part of the story. There's so many memorable scenes and moments, and
Mm,
plot developments that everyone remembers and loves. So the fact that these are rated this low is
mm.
really shocking to me.
Yeah.
Like, School Reunion is ranked higher than this, and regardless of whether how you
Mm,
feel about School Reunion, I don't hear that episode being talked about nearly as much as this
yeah.
story.
Yeah. Um I think again a lot of this episode with Army of Ghosts, it did have that sort of incomplete feel to it. But I don't know. It's kind of strange, but it felt like not a lot was happening in it.
Sure.
It's maybe like in the back half there was, but in the first half the pacing is surprisingly uh leisurely. And that in certain instances works to its benefit because you get some really nice characterizations,
Yeah.
which is really good. But even and it does sort of the leisurely pace is kind of in tandem with the um surprisingly light-hearted tone in a lot of the first half. I mean, you've obviously got the confrontation with the idea that, oh, these aren't your dead relatives, they're just these images, and you're just imagining it. That's kind of heavy, but then you've got the fucking Ghostbusters parody, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's an interesting one. I think, like the way I see it is, I think I preferred Doomsday quite a bit more than this story.
Of course. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it is like I'll tell you what does surprise me is, given that I again enjoy Doomsday more, that they're so close in ranking. That kind of surprises me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking through a lot of the written reviews, and it seems
Hmm,
like a general consensus is. I saw one person saying that Ten and Rose are still obnoxious as a pair, which, look, as someone who does hate Rose, I don't really see that criticism, especially in this episode when they're barely together. But another criticism is that I think in general people wish that the Torchwood arc built up to a lot more than it did, because I think a lot of people, for a lot of people, with Torchwood having such a heavy emphasis, especially with how Queen Victoria set it up,
hmm.
that they don't really play a huge role in this finale, as opposed to just being a vessel to get the Daleks and the Cybermen together.
Yeah, they're mostly a part of the setup, really, to get it all
Yeah,
sort
and
of
I think
make.
I think
Hmm,
the general thing is that people were being like, they're set up as this thing that, like, well, oh, if the Doctor ever comes back, Torchwood will be waiting for him. And I think people were wishing that Torchwood would be a more antagonistic force in this,
yeah,
um, which is the setup and would make this a bit more of a unique
mm.
finale than just bringing back another mob villain that the show's done before. But
Because it,
I don't
yeah,
know.
because
I mean,
mm,
I think they play their role here fine enough, and they
mm,
what they do is that they present the Doctor with a new challenge, which is that it,
mm,
it takes away his ability to walk into a room and just command authority. Like, it
yeah,
takes taking that ability away from him and forces him to go about things in a different way, which is interesting
yeah,
to see. But that's
yeah.
about
It's
as
interesting.
much opposition as they put up throughout
Yeah,
both of these episodes.
yeah. I mean, they're not like the fact that they're sort of almost as casual as they are about, oh, the doctor's here, hey doctor, yeah, let's hooray, let's cheer him on. But oh wait, no, you're actually a prisoner, so let's come on doctor, let's just get you in this room. So it is weird that it's not more antagonistic, as you say. I
Mm.
it's kind of a bit of a catch-22 because I actually do kind of like the fact that they're being so sort of chummy with
Oh yeah, I do
him,
as
and
well.
it adds to, again, that sort of light-hearted tone, which, I mean, let's put it this way: given how intense Doomsday is, and given how light-hearted I think a fair bit of Army of Ghosts is, good God, they could have done way worse in
Mm.
handling the tone. And I think having Torchwood be as unantagonistic as it is helps with that. But in
Yeah.
terms of like a broader story arc, yeah, you kind of sit there thinking, well, you had that fairly intense bit at the end of Tooth and Claw where Queen Victoria sets it up. So, and not to mention the ending of Christmas Invasion.
Yeah, yeah.
You'd think there'd be more there'd be more to it than that, and I'm not sure what RTD's plans were. Like, no, he didn't create Torchwood the show, did he, or was that?
think he I think he did. I'll quickly check. I know that he didn't. Uh, he wasn't like in charge of it for its entire tenure,
Hmm.
but I'm not sure if he. was the creator or not. Let's
Mm.
just have a look. He was the creator.
Yeah, okay. So, mm.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what his intentions were. Like because Torchwood, I think, premiered like these episodes aired in like July of 2006, and Torchwood I think was in October. So he probably had obviously a really good idea of where he wanted to take Torchwood. So maybe he thought, oh well, if it's going to be more serious, I'll deal with it in the show. But it is still a little bit confusing how it turned out, I suppose.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
The episode has a 7.7 for plot, which I think is largely there because of how well it sets all the pieces up for the finale.
Yeah.
It doesn't really. It tells a complete story regarding the ghosts. We learn all about them and their motivations and what they're doing in this episode. The ghosts don't factor into Doomsday at all. So in terms of Army of Ghosts, it does its job, and it also sets up everything it needs to for the finale. So in that sense, it does, everything it needs to. It doesn't do a whole lot more besides that.
Yeah, I think there's one part of the plot that I have a problem with, and I'll get into that. Excuse me, later on. But generally speaking, yeah, like it's doing its job solidly enough, and I was actually watching it again yesterday, and there are small bits of the plot and also even dialogue and stuff that I appreciate now more than when I first watched it this week. So, yeah, I think generally speaking, it works. There are nice twists here and there, with all the returning characters, of course. So, I mean, like when Mickey shows up, that's really quite enjoyable. So, yeah, generally speaking, there's nothing, certainly in terms of the overall story, where I can say, oh yeah, why, what's happening here. So yeah, I think the plot. You said it's 7.6. Did you say for plot or
7.7?
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'd put it a little lower, but generally speaking, that sounds about right to me.
8.2 for acting. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the only moment of acting that really stood out to me is when a couple of the people who are being controlled by the AirPods, when not Freema Agyeman, but the other two, when they have to die, and it doesn't really come across as very realistic. But everyone else is doing a good enough job here.
Yeah, and the main cast, that's kind of what you really stay for, and they're doing a great job as always. Really good moments. The characters themselves are quite entertaining. Good turn for Camille Kaduri as well. I really love that conversation that she has with Rose in the TARDIS when she's saying, who basically asking, "Who are you and who are you going to be?" I'll get into more detail about that later on, but that was quite a meaty, dramatic moment, and I really appreciated that. The woman who plays Yvonne, I love her. She's so, I don't know, kind of smarmy and very, she's what you think of when you think of, a corporate PR sort of person. And she really plays the role well. She's sort of just confounding enough to enjoy disliking, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but she's also got, there's enough of the, she's a deceptively layered character as well.
Yeah.
It would have been very easy to just write her off as a, or even just write her as a, every time she goes on about, for the good of the British Empire, you can imagine writing a character like that would fit completely perfectly in Regency era England.
Yeah, well, I mean, she could have been written like the what is it, the general from the Sea Devils, all those sort of nasty imperialist tendencies. But as you say, there is some level of nuance, and even small things like when she first sees the TARDIS on the in the camera footage, there's that look of shock, but there's genuine sort of wonder there, right? It's not just, oh, here's another piece of alien tech we can claim and explore. It's like, oh wow, it's the Doctor, Yeah, it's real. And yeah, and that also that great bit where where the Doctor's like, okay, go ahead, just open the rift, they have the countdown, and then she finally sort of acquiesces. They're really nice little moments and showing, oh, okay, so there's more to her than being, a corporate face, basically.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is really great.
1.6 for effects.
Yeah, I mean,
Nothing
maybe
looks, nothing looks awful, but nothing looks terribly realistic either.
yeah,
The sphere is very obviously CGI. The ghosts look fine, except for the one shot where it walks through the doctor, which is very
yeah.
funky. But largely, it's all fine, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there aren't. I don't think there's heaps of CG in
Not particularly, no.
in
It's
this
just
one.
it's mainly for the larger establishing shots, like the
Yeah.
Torchwood warehouse where they've got the big spaceship.
Yeah.
And also, whenever they show a shot from a landmark that isn't British, it doesn't look
Yeah.
terribly convincing. Like the shot of the Taj Mahal, especially, just looks like a
Mm,
holiday snapshot that someone took,
yeah.
and then they superimposed ghosts onto.
Yeah.
It's not, but you can tell they didn't go to those locations. But
Yeah.
those are really the only places that stand out.
Yeah. I mean, with the ghosts, yeah, they look. Maybe they're not as super realistic. But they're not really meant to be.
No, yeah.
Because they are just sort of void.
Footprints,
Traveling
yeah.
things. So they don't need to focus on the hyper realism, and it also helps to make them look sort of non-threatening, which is kind of the point.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that helps. And even with the sphere, I'm just thinking of this now. I don't think there are a lot of shots of the sphere itself. You see a couple, but for the most part, it's mainly just looking at reaction to shots of people looking at it, which works to the episode's benefit, so that they're
Yeah.
not, you're not scrutinizing how realistic it looks too long. So, yeah, I think it works fine enough.
7.7 for replay. Yeah,
Um,
I don't think this episode gets worse on a rewatch.
yeah, I think again maybe a little lower, but I'd say it's a little lower in the sense that it's not something where like I'm gonna discover like super wonderful deep layers of nuance every time I watch it. But at the same time, when I watched it again yesterday, there were small little things that I actually appreciate a bit more than I did the first time. So again, a little lower, but that does sound about right to me.
And 70 out of 103 people say this requires a previous story. I weep for the person who went into this episode as their first Doctor Who experience.
Yeah, that would have been a bit wild.
Confusing. Yeah.
I mean, I've seen. I could imagine worse examples of finales that could hook in audiences, but there's a lot. It's obviously doing a lot of work to set up Doomsday, but there's just so much that you really need in terms of world building, in terms of character, and even also character arcs. That you'd really need to understand. I mean, even small things like, well, no, it's not really a small thing, but when Mickey shows up, like, the reason why that's a shock is because, you know who this character is. You really would need to understand who he is and understand that relationship to get the full effect, I think.
Yeah, certainly. Right. Let's just get stuck in, I guess. Torchwood. We mentioned that one thing I want to a question I want to raise about Torchwood, and we mentioned it. We briefly touched on it earlier with how it was created to keep the Doctor away, but then they show up and they're in awe of him. I wonder if how the situation would have changed if the sphere wasn't a factor. He's clearly not being taken straight to a prison cell because they want to get his expertise on the sphere. So it leaves you wondering, well, it's clearly an opportunity of convenience for Torchwood that the Doctor's shown up at this precise time. And I wonder, I briefly touched on earlier as well, the idea that this finale, I think what people wanted from Torchwood out of a finale was them to be a more antagonistic force chasing down the Doctor. I wonder if that might have been where this story went if the sphere wasn't a thing.
Yeah, it's possible because I don't think it would have been too hard to write it into the episode because while you could argue, well, being able to call the Doctor, you'd need to have some pretty advanced sci-fi tech to do it, but they're Torchwood and they go around collecting sci-fi tech from, wreckages of spaceships and God knows where else, so it's not inconceivable that they could have done that.
Wreckages they shoot down, incidentally, which is another...
Sorry, what?
Wreckages that they shoot down.
Yeah, that they shoot down, so it's...
Another element, there's that exchange where the Doctor's like, did it crash?
Nope, we shot it down.
As a matter of factly as you can. No, it entered our airspace, so we genocided again. That is the Torchwood way, all for the British Empire, which is also their way.
That's another little thing about the antagonism. Should the Doctor be more upset about that? That they just sort of admitted that, and they admitted that they were the ones largely responsible for shooting down the Sycorax spacecraft?
I mean, he clearly gives them he's not thrilled about it, but I think at that point he's more sort of taking it all in and trying to... Yeah,
he's more stunned by, oh, okay, this is happening, and this is sort of the depths that humans will sink, so...
Well, yeah, he's trying to process exactly what kind of organization this is and what they want. Yeah. So, causing an outburst immediately, I think, would have done him a disservice, especially because I think at that point he was sort of getting the vibe of, okay, I'm not in control here. I need to just take everything in as long as I can, and then once I have all the pieces, then I can start.
Yeah, because he's trying to solve this mystery. He's trying to figure out what the ghosts are, and this is his opportunity.
Yes.
And it must be said, there's a lot of things that this episode is doing, and the fact that it is all coming together as well as it is really admirable. It's a very concept, I think, heavy story. Not just because of the ghosts, but because this is the first time we've got, Cybermen meeting Daleks.
We'll get to that next time as well.
Yes. And that I think is, that is why the sphere is there. But given how, heavy that concept is, how heavily they could have leaned into that concept, and how easy it would have been to sort of negate all the other story elements for that concept, they integrate it really well, I think, while also maintaining that sort of sense of mystery and thinking, oh yeah, what's going on here? What is this sphere? It's got no mass or anything. That's really weird.
And I think that may also largely be why this episode, on the timescales especially, doesn't have as strong a reputation as we might have suspected. Because definitely in this episode, but also going into Doomsday, there's a lot that they throw at the wall. And while they do a good job of tying it all together in a satisfying way, some of the elements do kind of feel like they would have had more quality ringed out of them if they'd been given more of a spotlight focus. Because, like I said, Torchwood takes a massive backseat, especially in Doomsday, but also in the back half of this story. As you mentioned, a lot of the Doctor unveiling what kind of organization Torchwood is largely forgotten as soon as the sphere shows up. But also the idea of, and again, this is more prevalent in Doomsday, but with the Daleks versus the Cybermen, the question that I think a lot of Doctor Who fans would have had for ages before this episode of which species is stronger is immediately pushed aside because we need to uncover what the Daleks' plan is and the Genesis Arc and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So the Cybermen are seen as, not for the last time in the revived era, pushovers compared to what the real villain is. It's not the true Dalek versus Cybermen war that I think a lot of people would have preferred to see.
Yeah. No, I don't. As they say, it's not war; it's pest control. So it's
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But a lot of this is getting into Doomsday, and a bit more to unpack.
I have a question. Would most of the story work without Torchwood? Could that have worked? I'm just trying to gauge how integral Torchwood is to the plot, given, as you say, they kind of take a bit more of a backseat than they could have, I suppose.
Torchwood's technology is used in a big way in to resolve all of this. And Torchwood is also ultimately the reason the ghosts are able to come through
Mm,
fully in the first place. But I suppose it wouldn't have been hard to work out another way
yeah.
to get the ghosts to become Cybermen. So I guess
I
in that
th-
regard,
mm,
I guess they're not like terribly
mm,
crucial, but they're a nice sort of layer to
yeah.
have.
I
You
think.
know, like I
Mm,
said, like the ghosts had to come through a certain way, so
yeah.
having it be this way
Mm,
works.
mm. I
Whether or
think.
not it works better than another hypothetical way, or
Yeah.
if Torchwood would have been better used elsewhere,
Mm,
is that remains to be seen. But they're
mm,
used here and they work well enough here, I think.
yeah. Um, I mean, it's possible that because really the whole interdimensional thing that's really just a callback to Rise of the Cybermen and Age of Steel. So
Yeah,
um, I don't know, like maybe they could have done it without Torchwood and just had the dimensional thing because that had already been established. You know, if Pete Tyler and whoever, even if they didn't have a Torchwood in their universe, if they were still doing, stupid interdimensional things, that could have been a way for the Cybermen to get through. But um, as you say, Torchwood kind of had to be there to I don't know, be like an anchor, I suppose,
yeah,
for the whole thing,
yeah.
because they established they have like basically a version of Torchwood in Pete's world. So um, yeah, I think as you said, maybe their presence isn't as integral as maybe people want it to be, but it still works well enough.
Yeah,
Um,
they don't I don't think that's a it's not a fumbling of the ball. It's more of like
no,
a um they catch the ball and then they neatly put it down as opposed to throwing it to someone else.
yeah, yeah, sure. Um, yeah, and also like you said that did you say that some like there are a lot of ideas here and not all of them are getting like teased out maybe as much as uh you wanted to? Is that what you said, or am
Well,
I?
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that like we only have like the first 10 minutes of the story to see how the world is reacting to the ghosts, and I think maybe
Mm,
it might have if this idea of ghosts coming through and people sort of adopt the ghosts into the society.
mm,
It's done. It's that as a concept is brushed through incredibly quickly at the start of the episode,
mm,
and I think that maybe like if like putting aside the fact that they're Cybermen, like just the very
mm,
idea of ghosts coming to our world and
mm,
people, uh, with scent memory kind of adopting and assigning them identities based on
mm.
the power of belief. That's an
Yeah,
interesting enough concept that could be its own standalone 40-minute
yeah.
episode.
But it's as you say, it's not given a lot of time. In a way, that's why the TV bit kind of works because it's a very good
Mm.
way. It's a montage, really, right?
Yes.
We're seeing how widespread this is, and it's just a really good way to quickly skim through it. So that even, as I say, even if having a ghost show up in EastEnders is pretty goofy, it helps sell the concept quite well. Um, but
So we've looked at stories in the past that have done this to a far bigger degree, where they've taken too many ideas and
oh
tried
yeah,
to push
yeah.
them all
And,
together so that they're all bad. Like nothing here is bad.
I was gonna say the reason why I brought up the whole so many ideas. This is not like a bad criminal script, for example,
No, no.
where he's putting in so many ideas that he has no interest in exploring, um, at all. No, it's all coming together. It is just as you say, perhaps a little bit strange. There's just so much, and weirdly enough, this is just the setup, right?
Mm,
Because obviously we've got a whole nother episode, and there's still quite a lot going on here. So,
yeah.
in a way, like the plot, it it is fairly cluttered, I guess, but given how much is happening, again, they're sort of tying it all together pretty well. Even, I mean, obviously, it leads into Doomsday, but even as a standalone episode, all the plot elements are sort of coming together pretty effectively, and I think that,
I think we're like by the end of the episode, you're left going, until
yeah,
the Daleks show up, and then you're going,
yeah, which is, and that works though because it's
Yeah,
exactly the reaction RTD wanted, I'm sure.
yeah.
Um,
But it's also
so
great because they reveal the Cybermen like a third of the way through the episode. And your first time through, they're going, well, hang on, that's you're showing your hand this early. Why are you doing that? But then it's so you can. Well, not only is it so you can put the pieces together when people come back with the AirPods in, which is a big deal in the second half of the story. And if you're going to have that be a plot element, you might as well show the Cybermen early because people will piece it together from that anyway. But also, there's so much more in the hand that you still have to reveal. You might as well show the Cybermen early just to. In a weird way, it kind of puts the audience off their guard, being like, okay, well, you've already shown me the Cybermen. I know everything that there is to know now. You can't surprise me anymore. And then they throw in Mickey, and then they throw in the Ghosts are all Cybermen, and then they throw the Daleks in at the end.
Yeah.
Like, it's just RTD going, oh, you think you've worked it all out? You haven't worked out shit, buddy.
No, it's good. I do wonder, and this is a note that I've written down here. Maybe like for older audience members, the twist of the ghosts being Cybermen may not be hugely surprising. Like, because it's like, oh, the Cybermen are here, that's spooky, and oh wait, there's a lot of all these ghosts all around the world. Gee, I hope nothing bad happens there, guys. Wouldn't it be a shame if they were all Cybermen? You know, yeah.
Well, we're only shown like there being a handful of Cybermen in Torchwood, and at no point are they seen as ghosts. Like, I think it's only like, and also I think it helps that after we see the Cybermen, the ghosts are basically abandoned for a bulk of the episode. Like, we don't see.
Yeah, they don't really show up until the end, really.
Yeah, and when they do show up at the end, it's in the Cybermen have already like taken over Torchwood. So at that point, you can be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I guess so. Yeah, and I think and I have to admit, and this is mainly going off my memory of when I watched it as a kid. Yeah, like that was a surprise. It's like, oh no, the world is doomed. That's super freaky, Russell. What are you doing to me? So you know.
But I think like I think the episode does a far better job of tying together stuff than we give it credit for. Because I know we've just been ragging on the episode for being like, oh, all these different elements could have been their own standalone things. But like when you really think about it, like they mentioned the Void ship. I suppose we'll discuss that for a moment now. As a segue into this, the Void ship being this vessel that you can use to escape existence itself and travel through the space between dimensions. You know, the Void was very briefly brought up in Rise of the Cybermen as well. Like, I think the Doctor specifically uses the term the Void and doesn't expand on what that means.
Yeah.
But even just the idea of there being multiple dimensions, and then, you know, the Cybermen being in it as well. The whole, like, by the end of the episode, it's like, oh, of course this was all connected. Of course this all relates to each other. But as they're introducing the individual elements, you're left thinking, okay, because this is a two-part story, these are just separate plot threads that are going to get tied together later on in a different and unique way. But then, like, the fact that they're all so intrinsically linked together and have been for, like, 7 episodes, or since 7 episodes ago when this concept was first introduced, I just will not be able to ever reiterate enough how well Russell T Davies is able to create extended storylines across not just individual seasons, but like entire eras of a show.
Like I said, when we looked at Love and Monsters, I wondered whether you could say he's maybe a better showrunner than individual scriptwriter. But either way, his showrunning skills, being able to plot out these long-term story developments, are really impressive. And I think that's why sort of his era, or one of the reasons at least, why his era is remembered as fondly as it is. And as you say, it is a little strange that people don't have as much, well, at least according to the timescales, as much fondness for these two stories, because he's generally pretty good at making knockout season finales. But yeah, I think your point of how well he's able to manage these long-term narrative threads is, it's well made, certainly.
I think the Doctor's really enjoyable in this story, actually.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, like, performances, obviously David Tennant's great. He knows how to really get those nuances. He can be funny, he can be serious, he can be scary, he can be smart. He can be all the great things.
Yeah, and you mentioned the scene where he's sort of shaking down the Torchwood director. I forget her
Yeah,
name, Yvonne, I think.
Yvonne. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. To stop the ghost shift, and he realizes that intimidation isn't working, so he just goes, and especially his approach in general of just walking into a room and being able to just instantly command authority has been shot to hell. So he then takes a passive approach, and it's really fun to watch.
yeah. Um, and there's something even uncomfortable about it. He's like goes into super
Oh yeah.
serious. So, okay, I'll just sit here and wait for the world to collapse. Don't worry. I'll just sit
Well,
here
it's the,
grinning and
you don't want my help. I'm happy to sit back and watch everything go to shit.
some men just want to watch the world burn. So
It was the right approach to take with Yvonne as well, because she's obviously
yes,
well versed with who the Doctor is. She knows the stories.
yeah,
Um, she knows what kind of person this is, and this is an approach that he hasn't taken before. So to see him do that
yeah,
clearly like unsettles her, because she's prepared for him to be authoritative and
yeah.
demanding, but she's not prepared for this.
Yeah. He, like she says to him, you come in and meddle with human affairs. I mean, I'm not.
Mhm.
That's not. Maybe
Assuming
not.
alien authority over the
Yeah,
rights of man.
assuming alien authority over the rights of man.
Which
Yeah.
is that a step away from like being like they're coming over here and taking our jobs? Like, is there some kind of meta like layer to that? I don't think there is.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's more dealing with the thematic concern of how much power the Doctor has in the same way that Waters of Mars did.
Sure.
That's how I interpret it.
But at the same
Yeah.
time, Britain can become truly independent. You can imagine that being said for Brexit.
Oh yeah, no, that's what you mean. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
But I don't think that
yeah.
was the intention, but
Well, I
it's
think mm,
it's odd that we were able to draw parallels to that
maybe,
I don't think
yeah,
were
maybe,
intended.
maybe, maybe that goes to the amount of nuance in Yvonne because, like, she's able to recognize, um, I don't know, like the Doctor not having power over people. Um, she's able to recognize that that isn't maybe an important thing to address, but then she just goes right back to the, for want of a better phrase, make Britain great again. Actually, no, that's basically what she
I
says
mean,
with the
that
whole.
is what she does, yeah.
Yeah, so the way I interpret those sorts of statements and putting them together, that does speak to more just the nuances of her character.
Well, certainly, if you can imagine a character with that overt subtext being written today and being way more on the nose. Like, I'm imagining the Jack Robertson character from the Chibnall era, who was a completely obvious stand-in for Donald Trump. Like you can imagine a character like that being written today, and they're making buses with things like we're keeping the aliens away, Torchwood
mm,
for the win.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I think it's a credit to the subtextual nature of the
mm,
character that we
mm,
got back in 2006.
yeah. Um, so yeah, I'm not. Yeah, that's how I. Yeah, like what I said. That's basically how I feel about it. I'm not 100% sure though.
Me
Um,
neither. It's just
yeah,
something that's interesting to
yeah,
think about.
yeah, sure. Um, I'm just gonna go over some of the notes I've got here.
Sure.
What have I got? Completely forgot that Frema Agyeman is in this.
Yeah, I always forget as well. It's
That
interesting that she pops up here and then, what, 3 episodes later becomes a companion?
is strange. That is.
I meant to look this up beforehand. I'm wondering if like she had a nice she formed a good relationship with the people on set and behind the
Mm,
scenes that Russell was like, you know what, let's use her again.
mm.
Um, yeah, you keep going.
Yeah. What of? I wrote down the Ghostbusters reference is fine. I guess could be worse. I mean, like, I don't know. Movie references like that a lot of the time annoy me when they're
Sure.
that sort of on the nose, but like it's so dumb you just kind of got to enjoy it, and I think it is largely sold with David Tennant's performance. And at the very least, I sort of admire the risk that they've got a line that's that goofy, but it's still in, conformity with the tone of the rest of the episode. So that's fine, I suppose. I really like, I said this before, really enjoy the conversation between Rose and Jackie in the TARDIS.
Mm.
Things like, when Rose says Mama used to work in a shop, and Jackie's like, what's wrong with working in a shop? And that just, those little nuances really make moments like that quite dramatic. I like, little conflicts like that. And also, like, having Jackie say, oh, someday Rose may not be even human. I felt that was pretty harsh. I understand why she said it, and maybe, she may be right in that, this, like, I don't know, maybe it's similar to what you've said about what the Doctor leaves behind. Well, if these companions keep traveling with him, what's going to happen to them? But I felt like that seems to be a bit of a mean thing to say to your daughter. I'm not sure about that.
Well, okay, you've brought up the perfect moment for me to segue into my traditional segment we have on the podcast, which is let's nitpick every little thing Rose does in this episode and find some reason to despise them. Well, I'm self-aware about it, at least.
Yeah.
No, okay,
Anyway.
just briefly before we get into this, I was trying to look up if like there was any behind-the-scenes stuff with Freemanagement. I couldn't find anything. I think they were just like, I think it is just as simple as we thought she was a good actor that we underutilized.
Yeah, sure.
Let's make her a companion properly.
And it's not like they haven't done that before, and even since with Doctor Who.
Certainly
So,
not. But okay, back to that scene. I think that it's with the Jackie and Rose conversation there. I think that's less about Rose as a person and more about the way she identifies herself within the TARDIS crew. And it brings me neatly onto my second proper issue that I have with Rose as a character that hasn't really come up in a major way yet, but does in this episode and does especially in the finale as well. And that's her codependency. And I think that's what Jackie's highlighting here. It's like the longer you travel with the Doctor, the more you surrender bits of yourself to just being with him, and eventually you won't even have any of your own individuality left. And that may seem like a bit of a reach, but I wrote down a quote that Rose says during that scene. And it's Jackie follows it with Jackie precedes it with something along the lines of, "Aren't you ever going to stop and settle down?" or something like that.
Yeah.
And then Rose responds with, "The Doctor never will, so I can't."
Yeah.
Now, she's not in that moment at all considering her own future there. She's not considering what she might want to do, like, what kind of future she wants to have. She's literally just thinking, well, that's what he's going to do, and therefore I must be there. Like, with most well-written characters, that would be more of a consideration. They would actually have a moment of like properly thinking about, oh, will I ever want to settle down? Like, I like traveling with him now, but like, will there ever be a moment where I'm done with this? Rose doesn't even consider it. She's immediately like, nope, I'm traveling with the Doctor forever. That's who I am. And I don't think that's a good character. It's certainly not a very nuanced character.
If, just as a hypothetical, if she said that and said it, with the same tone and insistence, but that idea got seriously challenged in these episodes, would you say that would be a bit different, or wouldn't it really matter? The fact that she's just saying this is enough to frustrate.
Well, I think it's especially compounded by stuff that we see in the finale. And stuff that follows on with it. The very fact that her ending is like literally she gets ripped away from the Doctor without her own consent. It ties into the fact that no, she definitely would have gone with him forever without considering what was best for her, the people around her. And again, it's something that it's stuff that's come up briefly prior to this. But I don't think it's a very good um, it just goes back to the whole the companion being a role model thing. Like as I was briefly
Mhm.
scrolling through the Martha Jones Wikipedia page trying to find some uh, behind the scenes information about why Freema was cast, despite
Mm.
having been on the show the previous season. There was a segment about how Martha was a really great role model for women in STEM. You know, the fact that she was a
Mm.
doctor
Mm.
herself, and also a whole thing about being the first companion of color, which is a whole other
Mm.
matter entirely. But the very
Yeah.
fact that she was a medical student, and also you know as a woman as a woman exploring that, which was still a novel idea at the time. From where like it was still like they were trying to encourage
Yeah.
young women to pursue STEM related fields, and you
Yeah.
know having Martha be a medical student was
Sure.
a big thing for that.
Mhm.
But also when everything you consider about Martha as a character, everything that she did, you know, she never once she liked the Doctor. You
Mm.
know, she had the same level of infatuation as Rose did,
Mm.
maybe a bit less, but she
Mm.
still challenged the Doctor on various decisions that he'd made.
Mm.
She pushed back whenever he did something that she found a bit iffy,
Mhm.
and she did not at any point immediately decide to herself, "I'm just going to follow him forever." She at a point made the decision to leave. You know, Martha
Yeah.
is a character with autonomy. Martha is a character that can make her own decisions, and
Mhm.
Rose, the way that she has developed as a character, she has neither of those things.
Mm. Mm. Um, yeah, I see what you mean. I wonder. I don't know. Like,
I think it's
yeah.
I don't necessarily like it. That obviously wasn't the intention. I think it's largely because they're trying to play up the romantic
Yeah.
side of the characters,
Yeah, I think a
which
lot
is
of
another thing that you know
yeah.
not great for different
Yeah, with
reasons.
yeah. Um, I think
And it has led to this whole situation of the companion, like making the companion a love interest, or inevitably
mm,
leads to this, where the most tragic ending is to
yeah.
separate them, despite the fact that they want to stay together.
Yeah.
And there's even a way you can do that well,
Mm.
and it largely has again it's largely with stuff that happens in Doomsday that I'm not going to bring up because it's not the
Yeah, yeah.
episode for it. But it starts here, and it's just the kind of ending where I'm like, okay, I guess there has been character growth, but I wouldn't consider this to be a positive change for the character. She's gone from someone with
Mm.
no ambition. I mean, she says it in
Mm.
this episode as well. You know, I was for the first 19 years of my life, nothing happened, and I used to
Mm.
work in a shop. You know, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And it goes back to stuff from the first episode where she's like, her shop blows up, and then instantly she's like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to be serving chips for the rest of my life. A
Mm.
character with no ambition. That's a perfect kind of character that needs to step above the TARDIS so they can learn that there's more that they can
Yeah,
do. You
sure.
know, that's the Donna character arc. You know,
Mm.
I'm just a temp from Chiswick, and then her whole arc is about learning that she's so much more than that.
Yeah,
But
sure.
what we instead get is a character who doesn't learn to take value in herself and her own accomplishments. She takes
Mm.
value in being the Doctor's companion,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's literally all she cares about.
Yeah.
And she not only that, but she also feels entitled to it, as if there's
Mm.
some grand cosmic thing that like she deserves it for some reason. I mean, I think that's more overt in other episodes than it is here. But there is that that brief moment when you know she says, "I used to work in a shop," and she says it clearly as if it's like not a great thing.
Yeah.
And then Jackie has to respond with, "Well, I work in a shop," and
Yeah.
she has to quickly pivot to, "No, that's not what I meant." And Jackie's
Yeah.
like, "Well, no, it is."
Mm.
I
Yeah.
don't know, like
Yeah.
it's just all these different little character elements that could be good things to explore if they were intentional,
Mm.
but they clearly weren't, and it's all for the purpose of having
Yeah.
this romantic arc between the Doctor and a companion, which is
Mm.
bad for its own separate reasons,
Yeah, yeah.
but then just compounds all this other stuff on top of it.
Yeah.
Is the reason why I don't think Rose is a good character.
Mm. Mhm.
We've gotten to this
Mhm.
point. We're so close to the end of her run on the show, and it's
Mhm.
taken me this long to properly like with all the episodes put together.
Mm.
Like, please tell me you can see it now.
Yes. Well, my thoughts on Rose are, I think essentially what they were by the end of, by the time I got to the end of the first season, which is, as I've said multiple times, don't have that the same sort of visceral reactions and problems that uh, you have. I think there have been moments where I think like there are fairer interpretations to make of her character. Now, having said that, I do now understand that she's she's not as well written as I think people may have been remembering, and I think she's a fair bit overrated. Now part of that might be because, and I think you've even said this, Martha is an underrated companion by
Definitely.
comparison. Um, and I don't know, maybe it's just maybe people like Rose because she was the first revival companion. I'm not sure, but yeah, I think I think there is maybe a bit more nuance than your interpretation um reads into a character, I suppose. But uh certainly, yeah, there are a lot of writing flaws, I think, with her characterization that could have been better at the very least. And in
And also,
term
really quickly, sorry.
Yeah,
Rose
no,
gets
go ahead.
cast for trap number 17. Happens
Yeah.
again here. She gets locked in uh, the chamber with the sphere in it almost immediately.
Actually, I was gonna
She doesn't do much in the beginning of the episode because the focus is on the Doctor and Jackie exploring Torchwood.
um
But Rose
hmm.
literally steps out of the TARDIS and immediately gets captured or trapped.
well
Perfect, just perfect. It happens again.
actually, I wanted to ask about that. I wanted to challenge that slightly because she decides to deliberately go searching through the bowels of Torchwood. So does that technically count? Because it seems that she was deliberately trying to solve the mystery.
She
That in
was, but
itself I have a problem with, but given
sure.
how it was structured and given how it's like, oh, she slipped by all this security, even though it's a top secret government organization and all
And
of the
everyone has psychic
everyone
training.
has psychic training. That was
Well,
that
I
was
would
a bit of a problem.
I would agree if her doing that unveiled any information that we, the audience, didn't already know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if she was the first person to go into the sphere room and we had all this stuff explained to her by uh what's his name? Rajesh Singh, I
Yeah.
think. Incidentally, great name for an Indian character. Just take most commonly known Indian first name, most commonly known Indian surname, smoosh them together, you've got yourself an Indian character. Great. Um, but yeah, like she explores a room we've already been to look at
Mm-hmm.
something we've already know everything we need to know about,
Mm-hmm.
and then immediately, she tries something, it immediately doesn't work, and she gets trapped. Like that's her role. She doesn't, we don't learn anything new. She's there so that we can have the Daleks appear at the end, and there being slightly more danger because oh no, one of our main characters is now trapped in a room with the Daleks, and the Doctor
Mm-hmm.
has to save them again.
I
Like it serves its
mm,
purpose for this story, and it's not that bad in isolation. But again, 17.
yeah.
17. She's
Yeah.
been in 26 episodes by this point, and this is the 17th time that she's been captured or trapped somewhere and explicitly needs saving. And most of those times, it has not served any story purpose besides that.
Mm, mm. Um I feel like that there's a bit more purpose to it. Um because she has those confrontations with the Daleks. Having said that, that's more of a doomsday thing, I suppose. Um, I
And
look, I
again,
see.
there have been out of the 17 times there have been way worse examples of this.
Yeah,
But it's purely the point that I'm here like I'm watching the episode, and when Dr. Singh says seal the room, my immediate reaction is,
mm,
well, of course. I mean, it's Rose. Why,
Um,
why wouldn't she get captured or trapped in this situation? It's Rose. This is all she does.
um, look, I understand your point. I think I don't think I can give it to you in this case.
Fair
As you
enough.
say, there are certainly worse examples than this. There's a fair amount of I think agency she takes here when she herself is exploring. Again, really strange and kind of annoying that she doesn't like make any resistance. That was
Yeah.
probably the biggest flaw with the plot I had. It's like again, massive government agency, and this also in a way goes to your point about Torchwood not being a massive threat. Well, it's kind of clear that they're not a massive threat because
Mm,
Rose was able to slip past all their security so easily. That was very strange, and
yeah.
it's not like a story breaking mistake, but it's just something where I think the rest of the story works pretty well, and I'm just in that one moment I'm like, that doesn't seem as you know um well put together as I think you want it to, Russell, does it? That's not great. Um but generally speaking, in terms of Rose, I think in that moment, I think there is a bit more agency than you're giving her credit for. So yeah, I don't think I can give it to you on this one.
Look, agency or not, like it's still evidence of a systemic pattern with the way these
Mm,
stories tend to write
mm,
her when she was on
mm,
the show.
mm.
Like I said, 17 out of 26 times this
Yeah,
has happened.
yeah,
Whether
like
or
it's
not in
mm,
this situation it was to serve a purpose in the second part of the story, or she was
sure.
exercising more agency despite that, like
Hmm.
this is a pattern that,
Yeah.
and it's also a ratio that I would argue you would be hard pressed to find in
Mm,
any other companion. At least the
mm,
bulk of them
mm,
don't happen to them nearly as much as this.
hmm. Um. Yeah. I think I see what you mean. Like at the very least, even if this wasn't an example of it, the fact that it's reminding you of all the other examples, as you say, it may be more indicative of the broader problems
Yeah.
with the characterization throughout the last two seasons.
But
Um,
also, I'm looking
mm,
ahead to Doomsday, and I'm thinking, well, does it set up much? Because I don't think the Doctor's actions in any way change if Rose isn't down there. He's still going to go and face the Daleks. He's still going to figure out what their plan is. The fact
mm,
that Rose is there is just another thing he's going down there for, right?
yeah, yeah,
I don't think the story changes much if Rose is just
yeah,
with the Doctor the whole time.
mm. Yeah. I think I see what you mean. I mean, you're like arguably it adds a greater sense of threat because obviously a companion in danger. But as you say, given the Daleks are on the scene, he was gonna make it down there anyway because four Daleks is disturbing enough. Having them be the cult of Skaro is even more disturbing, and having them have a thing like the Genesis Arc is terrifying. So, um, yeah, I don't know. Like, as I said, I don't think I can totally give it to you, but I do understand your concerns uh, in this story. But at the very least, as you say, there are worse examples than this
Mhm.
in the other episodes. So yeah.
Um, I'm not sure how much more there is to discuss. We can also just say I don't think we've been tracking. No, we have been tracking revived era cliffhangers alongside um
Yeah.
classic series ones, just seeing how they stack up. This is obviously one of the better ones.
Yeah, it's really good. Um, it you know RTD he kind of knows what's gonna get you know
Hmm.
what's gonna make the fans' heads explode. It's like,
Yeah.
ooh, Cybermen, ooh, Daleks at the same time.
It's also great that this is also intrinsically a cliffhanger that cannot be solved within the first 10 seconds of the next episode.
Yeah,
Like, it's not
it.
like they're gonna pull four Daleks out of the sphere and then have them go exterminate. Wait,
Mm,
we've left something in the void. Goodbye. They go
yeah,
back into the sphere and then disappear. That's
yeah,
obviously not going to happen. So
no,
it's less of a how they're going to get out of this situation cliffhanger, and more of a, oh, what's going to happen in the next episode? cliffhanger, like teasing Daleks and Cybermen meeting for the first time in the series' entire 43-year run up to this point. It was exciting.
It's a very good cliffhanger. It is like, I mean, this is a bit obvious to point out, but the fact that it's setting up this conflict, like, something wild is going to go down in the next episode.
Yeah.
And you can just imagine the grin on RTD's face as he's writing that scene. Like it's funny to contemplate. I will say this. Oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
one more thing. It is a little annoying that Army of Ghosts is the only time for another 8 seasons that the Cybermen get to be the main villain in their story. I don't think it happens again until World Enough in Time and The Doctor Falls, the season 10 finale, where the Cybermen are allowed to be the main antagonist within a story. No, Nightmare in Silver. Nightmare in Silver is the other time. Well, even then they're playing second fiddle to Matt Smith's Mr. Clever. Like, even then, there's something else there. They played second fiddle to supporting character in The Next Doctor. They're part of a Rogues Gallery in Series 5. They're in the second James Corden episode, and they're the only consistent threat in that one, but they're far from a huge focus. Nightmare in Silver, Matt Smith as the antagonist is the big focus there, even though the Cybermen are quite good in that story. And then twice after that, the Master is their commander. I don't know what the Master's obsession with the Cybermen is, but literally in every post in every post Matt Smith Cybermen story, the Master has some kind of involvement. It's weird.
That is odd. That is weird.
And on only one of those occasions, the Cybermen get to be the main antagonist.
That is weird.
I know. I just think it's so weird because I love the Cybermen. I think they're such compelling villains. I don't know why the show for like almost how long? For 10 years or so.
Oh, right. Yeah. Pardon me. Yeah.
For another 10 years, the show doesn't seem to think they can carry a story on their own. It is bizarre to me.
Yeah. That is very strange when you think about it.
I think maybe it's because the revival focuses way more on the faceless horde upgrade all of humanity element, as opposed to the element from the classic series where, adapt to survive.
Yeah.
Which is a slightly different thing, and does occasionally crop up in the revival, but isn't as huge a focus.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why. I don't know. It's just weird.
Well, even like the whole sort of loss of humanity. And again, you have more experience, especially with the Moffat era, than I do. But that doesn't seem to be as integral as it does even in Rise of the Cybermen and Age of Steel.
Well, certainly not. And definitely on many occasions, humanity wins over the Cybermen. Like in Closing Time, James Corden's character is basically like fully converted into a Cyberman, but then he hears his baby crying and is able to instantly reverse the process. Like, for a while, the Cybermen are just jokes in Revival era Who.
That is weird.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they get away with it because these Cybermen are like run down and like they're on their last legs, and it's like it's makes enough sense from a in-universe perspective, but just from an outside thing, it's like, oh, come on. Why are you doing this to the Cybermen?
Yeah. Like, there's such a potential for the terror there, and even playing up the body horror, and the fact that they're not, it is kind of strange. And there's nothing wrong with the whole focusing on the upgrade part, but
no.
Yeah, that's weird. It is strange,
I think this story definitely plays a huge part in that. The fact that they are so staggeringly inept compared to the Daleks, I think, set them up to fail for future occurrences.
It's funny when you think about it, because again, this is the first time they've been together and like in the same episode and fought each other. Because there was even a plan to do that in, I think it was in the second Doctor's first season, or maybe second season. But Terry Nation was very, I think, protective of the Dalek property and refused to have them be in the same story. So after all this build up, and I know this is more of a Doomsday thing, but like, yep, Daleks versus, you know, a bunch of ants. That's essentially what's happening,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Surprising how not frustrating and disappointing that is, given that there was a fair bit of letdown there. I mean, that probably speaks to the strength of the way the episodes are written. But
yeah, also it just makes sense as well.
Mm.
Like, of course, the Daleks are more powerful.
Yeah.
They have to be in universe. They have to be, but they had time. Like this is the Cybermen's first revival season. They could have powered them up for this encounter.
Hey, they got lasers on their wrists now.
They do have lasers on their wrists now. That is new. This is the first time the Cybermen have been given a ranged attack.
I mean, they had a number of blasters in the classic series.
Sure, but built in.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
You can't disarm a Cybermen of their arm gauntlets the same way you can take a blaster from them.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that, as you say, it's just a little bit strange having the Cybermen sort of relegated to, second place, I suppose, as much as they are. Yeah. I've got a couple of other things here that I want to just go through.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about Allon-Z for a second, please?
Sure. This is another thing where I'm always like consistently surprised when I remember that they introduced the catchphrase this late. Because I imagine the 10th Doctor always saying Allon-Z, and it takes me a while to remember every time. Oh no, he doesn't say Allon-Z for the first time until his 13th episode.
It's almost the opposite with me, and that may be just because I really, really don't like catchphrases.
Sure.
Generally speaking.
Well, especially when you consider that Matt Smith's first Geronimo was at the end of David Tennant's first episode. They wasted no time giving Matt Smith a catchphrase, but they let David Tennant just kind of naturally find one, I guess.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, Stephen Moffat really didn't waste time with that catchphrase, did he?
Nope. Almost the first thing he said.
It's almost like that would be a pattern for Stephen Moffat's writing throughout his run, and that as a point of comparison, it's nowhere near as frustrating in the RTD era. But maybe that's just a coincidence. I don't know.
I mean, at the very least, he didn't give Capaldi a catchphrase. He learned his lesson eventually.
Yeah, that would have been bad. But yeah, and admittedly, I was having weird sort of Moffat flash forwards when I heard Allon-Z. And the funny thing is, ages ago, I was, I think I was on holiday somewhere, and they were just playing an episode of Doctor Who, and it was Voyage of the Damned, and he says it there, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe he said it slightly more than I realized, because I think for a while I was kidding myself and thinking, oh, no, it's not that bad, Nick. It's not this really annoying catchphrase that he says. It's just maybe once or twice. I'm like, this is like the beginning. It's the beginning of season 4. That story, is it, or was it in the weird little specials era?
There was a Christmas special between seasons 3 and 4.
Yeah. Okay. So either way, it's like, oh, okay, it's going up here, and I realized that, as you say, in contrast, it's nowhere near as frequent as it could have been. Certainly, I think in comparison to the catchphrases in Moffat's era. But
I think in sort of stark contrast to the 9th Doctor's catchphrase of fantastic, like you could watch that entire season and not even realize that it's a thing that he said quite a lot. Whereas here they really shine a spotlight on Allon-Z, where it's like, oh, I like that. I should say that word more often. Allon-Z.
Yeah, that's I think part of it. Yeah, it just. And it varies from show to show and piece of fiction to piece of fiction, but generally speaking, I don't like catchphrases. I don't even like them in sitcoms. There are a number of examples that really annoy me. And it's
a good thing that the Doctor Who has never had a catchphrase. Now, real quick, I'm going to exterminate this this menace by reversing the polarity of the neutron flow. Would you like a jelly baby while I do this?
Hey, look, that was like they only did that like 3 or 4 times in like 26 years. And I think that's the thing because no, honestly, there have been moments where I thought, well, Nick, you're always criticizing Moffat for bow ties are cool and fezzes are cool and whatever, but you
Oh
know that
yeah.
there are examples of that in the classic series, right? But then I realized, yeah, but they're not used as frequently, and even when they are used, that doesn't make them good.
I
Um,
always forget that Matt Smith had like 2 or 3 catchphrases at a time.
don't fucking remind me. Um, So yeah, that was anyway. I realize I'm probably hyper fixating on this
Sure,
on
sure.
on this moment, but man, it's just a little disappointing seeing that, especially and maybe it is just because I know what's coming, but
Yeah.
it's like, okay, we're doing this. All right, let's just yeah, let's have a fun little laugh and let's move on
Well,
if we
let's
can.
not forget, like David Tennant's alternate catchphrase is I'm so sorry." Like, and he said that quite a lot this season as well.
But at least with that, it's at least there's like a more of a traumatic weight to it. It doesn't
Sure. Yeah.
feel like again the problem with Alan Z, I think for me, is that it feels like a line from a sitcom. There's not.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just oh, huh, the doctor being wacky, saying wacky things.
The
Let's
Doctor
see.
kicks down the door to the TARDIS, says Alonzi, and the audience applauds for 2 minutes.
And I mean, yeah. How many times does David Tennant's doctor say what 3 times in a row? Because I know
Oh,
they did that with the end of Power of the Doctor.
it's strange. I think, and I might be wrong, but I think that was only the 3rd time he said it. He says it at the end of
Hmm.
Doomsday. He says it at the end of Last of the Time Lords, and I think that's it.
Does he say it at the? Yeah, his Lost of the Time Lords. Yeah, that's the one before Voyage of the Dam. That's the
Yes,
bit where with the Titanic
Titanic bursts
comes through.
through.
Okay, yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, again, maybe not great, but it doesn't annoy me as much as Alan Z, which is to
Oh
say
no,
nothing
sure. Yeah.
of what I think of, Fez are the cool and bow ties are cool. Which, not to mention, by the way, those lines. One of the reasons I annoy them is because they're so. I think they're dumb. I think they're poorly constructed and just memey and annoying. But that's a whole other discussion. Anyway, point is, Alan Z, a little bit annoying seeing it here, but I thought, okay, well, fuck it, let's just move on, whatever. Oh, and I actually wrote, this is what I wrote. I wrote, Alon Z, I don't like catchphrases for the Doctor. Also, I think as catchphrases go, it's more subtle than bow ties are cool.
Sure.
So that's what I wrote. So that's that. Yeah, I quite like Tracy Ann Oberman's performance as Yvonne.
Yep.
As I mentioned, that's also very good.
It's very good. Yeah.
Small little thing. Torchwood refuses to go metric. I hate the imperial system of measurement. I think it's
I was
maybe it's
trying to remember what that was referring to, but yeah, you're right. Was it like 60 feet above London?
No, it's when she says that's an imperial ton, by the way. Torchwood refuses to go metric.
Oh, I
Yeah,
must have missed that line. Yeah, wow.
when
Okay.
she's got the gravity things. Um,
I was gonna. When was the switch in England from imperial to metric?
um, I don't know. I know there's a joke about it in the thick of it with a bunch of people that call themselves the metric martyrs, but that's a whole other thing. I don't know. I don't know when that would have been. Maybe the 70s.
Maybe.
Any case, imperial. I think the imperial system's bullshit.
Yep.
Just putting that out there.
Do things by tens. It's so much easier.
Yep. More even. It's more efficient.
It's,
Metric
it's,
system's better.
it's incredible how many times America has chosen to make things more difficult for themselves just to spite the rest of the world.
Well, speaking of things like that, I've also got written down, as you pointed out, keep Britain great. How disturbingly Trumpian.
I think Fahrenheit is the only one that like actually makes sense because it's like smaller increments and it's more of a it's a more precise measurement than going into decimals with Celsius.
Yeah.
But even then, Celsius is based on water.
Yeah, I've heard that Fahrenheit is based on human body temperature, which is more probably useful for that, but Celsius is water. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe
in no other context does America's way of measuring things make any sense to me over doing it in batches of 10.
No. It's it's really, really annoying. Oh, this is a small thing as well. So the theme that plays when Rose looks at the Doctor from the TARDIS, it seems to be taken or basically ripped straight from Mussorgsky's, Night on Bald Mountain, which is really interesting. And I really like it. Like, it's not. I mean, I say being ripped from, but it works as a sort of a sonic reference, I suppose. It, yeah, like kudos to Murray Gold, basically, is what I'm saying. It's those little details that sort of elevate his musical scores, I think, and yeah, he deserves applause for that.
Of course.
I realized this is the first episode with the 3D glasses, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because I thought I said to myself, I swear they were introduced in like Rise of the Cybermen or something like that.
Well, it's interesting that the 3D glasses are seen as such a prominent tenth Doctor thing, but this story is the only time he wears them.
Yeah.
He doesn't pull them out again at any other point in the future, primarily because he already has a pair of glasses he can put on whenever he needs to examine anything. He has the specs already. And it's like, like the story finds a reason for him to be looking at this stuff through the 3D glasses, as opposed to just have it be a quirky affectation, as future Doctors and showrunners might decide to do with it. But it's interesting that image has kind of persisted beyond these 2 episodes, which is, I think, another reason why I'm surprised that this story is ranked so low, because, like I said, there's so much consistent iconography and imagery came out of this story.
Yeah, there's a lot of like a lot of famous sort of images and ideas. Like I said, because I was also convinced that these glasses showed up in other episodes, both before and after. But maybe it's just, because it's at the end of the second season, it's with a companion departure, and the episodes are as well written as they are. People just immediately associate 3D glasses with the 10th Doctor. Maybe that's what that's about.
3D glasses are cool. Puts them on in future episodes.
Anyway. Two more small things here. Jackie challenging the Doctor when he kills, I've got that in quotation marks, the people with the earpieces. Though seemingly redundant, they were already dead. It's still quite stirring. I like those moments when the Doctor's sort of authority is challenged, and they already sort of did that a little bit with Yvonne, but having Jackie sort of do that made it all the more effective. It also makes me realize, this is like the second last episode we'll see. Is this the second last episode Camille Coduri shows up in? Because I can't remember her being in any other episodes beyond this season.
She appears in Journey's End.
Okay.
Alongside Mickey, and she's also in the big let's say goodbye to all of the Russell T Davies era characters. Generating. But that's it.
Just a shame, because she's she gives a really good performance. I think as a character, I think she's a little underrated, honestly.
Oh no, absolutely. I think that very few of the family members of companions are looked upon very fondly by the Doctor Who fan base as a whole. I've never once heard anyone say anything positive about any of Martha's family, for example. There are obviously massive exceptions. For example, Wilfred Mott is the shining example of how to do a family member of a companion character. Jackie's obviously another example of that. I think that Rory's dad, for his limited appearance, is also very strong as a character. But, very few family members outside of that stand the test of time or memorability like they do.
Yeah. But I just think, Jackie's she's a really good character, and Camille Coduri's performance really anchors it, and I felt like pointing that out.
Well, I wonder if that's because this is like the first time we've like properly gotten to see a companion's family life. Like the classic series never really did that
Mm.
much. There was just sort of like, let's introduce this character in this situation, and now they're on the TARDIS.
Yeah,
And
not.
then I also
Mm,
wonder if in future companions they thought, well, we gave Rose a family, therefore we need to give our next companion a family, without really thinking about
mm,
why they were given a family in the first
mm,
place. Because Martha's family technically has a point in the series. They're like
mm.
tied to the Saxon stuff.
Yeah.
But like, do you honestly remember anything about the family members like of companions outside of that? Like, especially with Chibnall's
Mm.
characters, like there is an obvious exception with Grace,
Mm,
being how her death in the first episode is so intrinsically tied to the
mm,
story arcs of both Graham and Ryan. But do you
mm.
remember any of Yaz's family?
I remember that one episode, the beginning of Demons of the Punjab, and then something about her sister suffering from depression, I think.
Sure.
I can't remember. But yeah, either way, not terribly memorable. Yeah, and even like as you say, in the classic series, there's not really. I can't think of many examples. Um, where there's where families of companion get a spotlight at all, and even if
Yeah.
they do, I don't remember them being particularly significant. I mean, you see in Full Circle, which is Adric's first story, I think you see him with his brother a few times, but that's one story.
Sure.
So yeah, it certainly this is the first time the family of companions has been as emphasized as it has. So yeah, that makes sense. One last thing, and I was going to mention it earlier, but um, this goes to the direction. And by the way, this story is also directed by Graham Harper, um, who did Rise of the Cybermen and Age of Steel, and
Mhm.
the first part of Revelation of the Daleks, which is
Yes.
interesting. But when the Daleks arrive, it's obviously built up of a couple of shots, but I think it would have been better if instead of seeing the Daleks full, which we do, we cut to the POV shot because, like, if you've seen, the Survival series, like you'll know what that is,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just that small little bit of delay to help really sell the shock of it. But instead, it's looking up, silhouettes in the sphere, go back to companions, then look up again, and we see the Daleks, and then cut to the POV. So I thought, yeah, if they got to the POV sooner, that probably would have been more effective. But yeah, that was
Sure.
just a detail I mentioned.
They
I
have
noticed.
already they have already done that, though. I mean, that is
Mm,
basically beat for beat how they introduced the Daleks in Bad Wolf.
mm,
So I
mm.
think it would be weird to go to that playbook again,
Yeah,
especially
yeah,
because
sure.
it is like literally 10 seconds left of the
Yeah,
episode. You
yeah,
kind of want to cut to the chase.
yeah. Yeah, no, I guess so. I guess that
Yeah,
makes
but I
sense.
get you. I think that brings us to the end of the
Yep.
discussion. I am going to give Army of Ghosts an 8. I really like a lot of what this story does. I don't think it makes too many huge missteps anywhere it does, so it's only a case of I wish it was a little better.
Mm,
Like there's nothing wrong with the
mm,
story. I think it all works really well and it sets up Doomsday beautifully,
mm.
without much contradiction. So it's an 8 for me.
Um, I feel fairly similar, but I think I'm still going to stick with a 7 for this one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're going to leave you, the audience, also on a bit of a cliffhanger with this one
Mm.
because next week we're looking at the Seventh Doctor story, Ghost Light.
You can see, I spent a lot of time picking that episode, Ghost and Ghostlight.
You get a double ghost extravaganza
Mm.
leading into, I'm trying to work it out based on when this episode is being recorded, the back half of September. Close enough to a Halloween, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, we'll call it that a day. And
Mm.
it was intentional the whole time. Sure, why not?
Yeah. Sure thing.
Until then, I'm Alex.
I'm Fitz.
And if you're listening to this a while after it's been uploaded, then allons-y to the next episode already.
Yay.